important and kind of clever. A lot of what drives the story in Alan Wake is him trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
Yes.
Because the game showed us, here's our normal, here's our cabin on the lake, here's kind of our setup with the husband and wife and da 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 da. And then we instantly transition to 7 days. Alan doesn't know what happened during these 7 days. Neither do we, the players. We are just as lost as he is. We are feeling the same things that he is feeling.
Mm-hmm.
We're presented with this thing that doesn't match up with what we were shown early. We want to find out the mystery.
Yeah, and that's always a really fun like narrative technique is like, if you're writing a character that's existed in this world or in whatever world you've created, we find out as we go like what's going on and who's, what's happening. But when you have the character finding out alongside you, well, now we're both in this together.
Now, as he's known as for Alan Wake as a writer, but he always will quote things from Stephen King. And because Stephen King is a very prolific mystery.
He is the horror writer.
He is the horror writer. Yeah.
We don't quote Dean Koontz in this house.
Just a reminder, this is a spoiler-heavy podcast. Different series that require a spoiler warning will be in the description. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gaming Theater Podcast. Today's episode is going to be all about the storytelling style of Alan Wake. And to lead us and also get through this, I'm going to go over some of our guests that's going to be with us today. But probably the big one for us is going to be over here to my right.
My name is Liz, also known as Zombiehand, and I am an artist, cosplayer, various other things. I like video games, and I help out a lot on Gaming Theater Presents and podcast.
Nearby Liz today is...
Greetings, I am Brandon, also known as Tomatoman 7, and I do all kinds of video editing and production for not only Gaming Theater, but also production for the Gaming Theater RPG podcast.
And nearby him is...
Hi, I'm Rob. I am a student of game design, and I'm happy to share some insights with y'all.
Great. Before we get started, let's take a quick trip to the magical merch booth. Today is going to be just us letting you know about a couple of future ventures in November, and we've been talking about this in a couple of the previous Magical Merch Booth sections. It's all about Extra Life. Extra Life is a charity event that Gaming Theater and a lot of the members of our Gaming Theater Presents tend to do their own charity event. Now, two big events that are happening is the Gaming Theater is a live streamed on Twitch Gaming Theater Podcast RPG, or a GTP RPG. TTP RPG. It's a tabletop. And there'll be more information on that for you, but I'll be sending out links for that. Now, we've done that before last year, and we're going to do another tabletop game based on the previous podcast episodes. And I'm going to be the game master for that, and that'll be available on November 10th is when it's going to be showing. Official time frame will be listed with our Twitter/X profile, but also in Facebook. And I'll make an announcement as well in our Instagram profile. Hope to see you there. But also, Zombiehand is doing a live stream event as well.
I am. I'm also going to be doing Extra Life charity for, I think, the 4th or 5th year. I think 5th year, actually. I don't know. And I'm going to be doing the same thing that I did last year, where I do the Scream stream, and I play horror games. And for every time that I scream, I have to donate $1. Last year, it got up to 72, and I had someone match that, and then, so that was really fun to do. And I will be doing that Saturday, November 4th at twitch.tv/LizZombieHand.
And we'll be sending out all the links and everything for that in a lot of our social feeds. So that way you can keep up. And that being said, well, let's get back to talking about Alan Wake. And also, back to the show. So today's topic that we're talking about is a game that we have talked about actually in several previous episodes, Alan Wake. Especially with next week, Alan Wake 2 is going to be available thing, and Zombiehand is hands down the biggest Alan Wake fan I have ever met in my life. And I'm not saying that as hyperbole. I'm saying that as the next biggest Alan Wake fan doesn't compare.
He's calling me fat.
Alan Wake fat.
I'm so fat of Alan Wake.
Fat with a PH, right?
Of course.
Mhm. So, but Alan Wake hit at an interesting time in game development and design where a lot of people were taking different risks in storytelling. And Alan Wake, ironically, being about a writer, is also all about storytelling and where they get their inspiration such. So we'll talk about the storytelling for it while also going through the discussion of the game of Alan Wake. Now, just for spoilers for the game and the world of Alan Wake. Now, just to get everyone's attention on this, here's your big spoiler alert. We are definitely spoiling Alan Wake.
Well, Alan Wake's DLCs, The Signal and the Rider, Alan Wake's American Nightmare, and probably the Bright Falls miniseries, which is a prequel to the game, and the AWE DLC in Control.
Yeah, so those are your
All right,
biggest
I'm not certain I could handle that many spoilers for that many games, so I'm going to head out.
All right, see you, Rob.
No, I'm kidding.
It was good to have you.
Not like we haven't spoiled
Always
like
a pleasure.
well, what was it? We once spoiled like decades of television. You do realize that.
This is true. I was there for part of that.
All right, but let's start and kind of begin partially through the beginning. So, Alan Wake was a game that was developed by Remedy Entertainment. Remedy Entertainment is still a really interesting game developer for games. They've made Control recently. They've also made Quantum Break, Alan Wake, like we're talking about. But before they got to Alan Wake, and it's interesting in storytelling, they did another very big storytelling-based game before, Max
Death
Payne.
Rally.
And
Oh, Max Payne.
what did you say?
I said Death Rally. That was their very first game. I was making a joke. I was trying to be funny.
Wasn't Death Rally like
It was like a top-down car game.
it does things, but not a whole lot of storytelling in Death Rally, mostly concept of just a driving game. But anyone who's played through the original Max Payne knows that they do their storytelling very well as a noir-centric story style. So it's supposed to feel like this noir detective novel-based thing. So Remedy wanting to continue with this tradition of trying to become this big storytelling aspect of game development. I think was it directly after that the next project was Alan Wake?
So they had Max Payne, but I think this is relevant. Max Payne in 2001.
Yeah.
Max Payne 2 in 2003. And then Alan Wake in 2010, 7 years later.
So the fun thing about Remedy, though, is that they generally only work on one game at a time because they're a really small studio. Like, they spent, all that time working on Alan Wake, and they were published by Microsoft, which is why they were Xbox exclusive for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And so they got all the, they submit a proof of concept, and then Microsoft says, yes, we'll give you the funding that you want, and then they work on that. And so that's kind of been their thing. And I think it's only until recently that they actually started doing more than one game at a time, but that's mostly like they did the story campaign for some other game recently. I don't remember which one, sorry. They did the story campaign for an online shooter or something like that.
Oh, I think that was Project Crossfire or something like that.
Yeah. It's not unheard of for studios to work on multiple games because essentially you have all these assets for a studio, and rather than sit there and wait, we can just keep developing something else in the background while we're getting there. A lot of AAA studios would do that all the time.
But you can only do that if you're a big studio.
Exactly.
Yeah,
For a smaller studio, I mean, 7 years is definitely not unheard of in terms of the time it takes to develop games. But
Mhm.
for an indie studio, that's a big risk.
Yeah. And especially even being published by Microsoft, like Microsoft owned all their IPs, like were they just not given a deadline? Or like how
So
did that go?
so Microsoft, I don't believe owns the IPs, but they have right of first refusal.
No, they did own the IPs because they had to buy the Alan Wake IP back from Microsoft, which they did a couple of years ago, which is how they even are able to make Alan Wake 2, because they didn't own because so when they finished Alan Wake, they started doing proof of concept for Alan Wake 2. And there's actually a video out there that shows the proof of concept gameplay footage of what they wanted to do for Alan Wake 2, but they were told no, because Alan Wake 1 had such poor sales because it came out on the same day as Red Dead Redemption.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it had really bad sales, so they were like, no, you need to do a new game. We don't think that Alan Wake 2 would sell. So they started doing Quantum Break. But actually, sorry, fun fact, Alan Wake's American Nightmare was created while they were doing the proof of concept for Quantum Break. And so they used this new engine they were developing for Quantum Break, but they used it for Alan Wake's American Nightmare and then just made Quantum Break in it.
Yeah, it's not unheard of for publishers to try to retain the rights to an IP. Um, it's something that can come back to haunt them later in life. If you want an interesting series of stories about retaining IP, GOG is a company called they're just short for Good Old Games, and they're another platform like Steam or Epic Games. Except what GOG specializes in is trying to recover older games from the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s that might have gotten defunct and keep them up to date so that way they'll work on the newer game engines. There was a problem with that because they keep having to get the rights for it to have the permission to have it on GOG, and some of them will take them to places all over the world. I know that there's like 2 games that they managed that they could not get the rights to because of a bitter divorce that the other person is just not giving up the rights whatsoever because nuts to my X on this.
And that was sort of like Remedy's so small that like they really were at the mercy of Microsoft saying yes or no.
Mhm.
And it took them a while to even get the funding to purchase the rights to Alan Wake, because like Alan Wake didn't sell very well, Quantum Break didn't sell very well, even though I love it. It's one of the few games that I actually 100% and I love it a lot. And Quantum Break didn't sell very well. And then Control came out, and Control has been a smash hit. Like, it has been nuts how incredibly well that game has sold, and how well, like everyone has loved it. It has had great reception, all those things. And so they finally, with the funding that they got from Control, were able, Microsoft made the offer to sell them the rights to Alan Wake. And they said, yes, obviously.
Well, and I mean, keep in mind too, this is giving up the rights from the corporation's perspective. You have to understand it's basically I'm not going to be able to make any more money from Alan Wake.
Yeah,
And
no, I
they
get that.
might make some money from Alan Wake. But if they can make some money from Alan Wake, couldn't I make some money from Alan Wake? And that's a tough spot to be in, essentially. So if
Yeah.
Microsoft is making the offer, that shows that they don't think they're not only do they not think they're not going to make money from it, but they don't think Remedy is going to make that much money from it. And this is their last way to get money out of that IP.
Mhm.
Which is so wild because like Alan Wake has only, as far as I can tell, has only increased in sales. Like it definitely was like a sleeper hit, went super under the radar, and then became like a cult hit because people were like, now that I'm done with Red Dead Redemption, um, and looking for horror games and such, they could finally get to Alan Wake. Although I would classify it as a thriller, but whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah, and so it's interesting that despite all of the sales that it's had, Microsoft would be like, hey, like I think it cost them, obviously like a few mil, but
Mhm.
they were still able to get those rights.
And that happens once in a while. Sometimes, like the most interesting story I've seen of a right give up is Activision Blizzard gave up some of their rights to GOG for Diablo 1. Most of it was so that way they didn't have to remake the engine for Diablo 1 for a modern game, because it would have cost them more to try to build it. Let's let these guys do it and then collect a little bit of the extra paycheck on it. But yeah, no, when they give up their IP rights, they give up their rights for that thing.
Notably, Microsoft is not publishing Alan Wake 2. That's Epic Games that is publishing Alan Wake 2.
Yeah, so I'm getting it on PS5.
Well, and even more interestingly, they're currently negating physical release altogether to maximize profit range, unless someone has since picked up the distribution.
No,
for
so they
physical disc.
actually didn't want to do the physical release because physical releases for modern games are $70. Obviously, like it's been 60 for so long, but
Yeah.
with PS5 and then whatever the new Xbox is, they are $70 now. And so if they went with a physical release, it would have to be sold for 70, and they didn't want that. So it's digital, at least right now. Maybe they'll do a physical release later, but it's digital right now, which is why it's only 60 to get it right now.
Well, and I mean, physical releases for games, I think, really are going the way of the dodo.
I
We're all
would
connected. We've all got the internet.
I would put out
yes, there are a
money.
lot of cool advantages to having that physical disc, but it's outweighed by the cost that it is to make that physical disc. It's so much cheaper for the company just to do digital, and nobody wants to pay more for a game. So,
And
I
this
mean,
keeps
that's
happening.
true. But I'm just gonna say my Remedy games or Remedy Entertainment shelf that I have here could really use a nice, pretty Alan Wake 2 physical edition.
I mean, don't forget that's what happened to vinyl for a long time too. In the 80s and in late 70s, going into the 80s, vinyl went out the door because it was cheaper to make cassettes and then later CDs than it was
Yeah.
to
Well, I mean,
make
vinyls are
vinyl.
still expensive, but
Well, and they've
they're
come
just like,
back too, though.
yeah,
That's a
I
different
have
story.
several. It's just like it's like a novelty thing at this point, though. It's not like the main way that anybody listens to music because
Oh,
we
no.
all have streaming and YouTube and whatever.
And this magical thing called the internet in general.
Yeah. But it is a novelty thing, and I think I have like I think 7 vinyls, but I could have more.
But the thing that separates Remedy from a lot of the companies that are out there is their focus on storytelling. So if Max Payne, it was dedicated to old noir pulp comics and pulp fiction from the 20s and 30s and even up to, I believe, the 40s, when they started doing huge pulp novels for that, then this would be introducing yourself to the psychological horrors of the 70s and 80s and even the 90s for that, and those thrillers, and you can see that in the game. So with that, let's sort of step into the pages that is Alan Wake. So the way Alan Wake starts is Alan Wake is heading to Bright Falls, going on the ferry, making its way to Bright Falls. Judging by the ferry, I think Bright Falls is supposed to be in the Pacific Northwest, where they use ferries a lot and such.
In
Yes,
Washington.
it's
in
in
Washington?
Washington. It's a fictional town in Washington, which is part of the like. Alan and his wife are from New York, and they wanted something that is very far away and very different in the hopes that it will spur on Alan's writer's block or get rid of it.
Remedy in Washington, is that where their studio is located?
No, Remedy Studios is in Finland.
Oh, okay.
They did
Yeah, they were
travel,
finished-
though, to Oregon and Washington and took thousands of
Mhm.
pictures
Oh
They
yeah,
did
to
the same
create
for
a procedurally generated world system at the time.
also some of the photographs. So Alice is a photographer, and when you get into the levels that are in Alan and Alice's apartment, the photos on the wall or the walls are ones that she took, but it's actually ones that the developers took while doing all their research. So they're flying out like to New York and to Oregon, and they have like they do so They do so much research for it,
Mhm.
to make sure that they're at least capturing the feel and the aesthetic. Because like you don't go out into the streets of New York in Alan Wake or Control, you know.
Well, yeah, it's New York.
But
Yeah.
And that's super important, honestly, for a game like Alan Wake. You can do a narrative story based game that doesn't have like particularly great graphics, but just like for a horror genre game, good graphics that are kind of realistic, that are really good at putting you in that setting, are, I think, a necessity. It's not as scary if it's not as real.
Right.
Especially when the target isn't jump scares.
Yeah.
so with that, Alan and Alice make their way through the ferry. They end up at a diner where they meet a couple of people. One particular person that just all is completely out of place on there is someone that will be a reoccurring character that who's known as the log lady. No,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Um, the log
lamp
lady is
lady.
from yeah, the log lady is from Twin Peaks.
Hmm.
But she is a very obvious homage to the log lady.
Hmm.
But in the diner we also meet Rose, who is important. Um eh, sort of. I mean, she's used as a plot device, but then at the end, some things happen. And then we also meet Odin and Tor, um, who have escaped the mental hospital that they're in,
Hmm.
or the institution, which is like a lodge. It's like an artist lodge that they're forced to stay at.
Yeah. So you're going to slightly introduced to these characters, so you know they're they're important, and that's also a weird writing tool. Is it's almost like a Chekhov's.
I was gonna say this the smoking gun rule, because like almost everything that you like, all the locations that you go to and the characters you meet are important in some way. And so the diner, you do actually go back to later in the game, but it is the hub where you're introduced to Rose, Odin and Tor, the lamp lady, and Barbara Jagger. Very briefly, you meet Barbara Jagger, and she's the one who gives Alan the key to the lake and the instructions on how to get there, or the the key to the cabin on the lake and the instructions on how to get there. And she's obviously like a massive deal to the game.
It's important to note that the first room that you're coming into, all these characters are important, and that's the way Alan Wake's done. From a game design standpoint, it's now I don't have to animate 17 other characters in this diner when I only need these ones because it's important to the story. But it's very
Yeah.
much just Chekhov's gun, and this is very much you will see writing tropes and writing things that are just in the game. After they leave from there, they go to the cabin. Stuff happens. You find out. I think from there, Alice is afraid of
Yeah, you
is afraid of
find
the dark.
out on the way there that Alice is afraid of the dark. They go in there and you find out they go into the cabin, and Alan finds out that Alice brought him there specifically to see Dr. Emil Hartman, who can help struggling artists, um, because he's had writer's block for 2 years. And he has the name of the book, and that's it. He has the title of it, and he hasn't been able to write a single word. And so she kind of like tricked him there, sort of. Like she just said, let's go on a vacation, but then wants to take him there. And when he realizes that she brought his typewriter with him, or with them, um he gets pissed, and he leaves the cabin knowing that she won't follow him because it's dark out. But that is enough time for Alice to be attacked. And um Alan goes, running back into the cabin to try and figure out what's going on. All the lights had gone off, and when he finds her, she's fallen into the lake somehow.
Mhm.
And he's like, holy shit, my wife, I gotta save her. And so he dives in after her, goes unconscious, wakes up. It's a week later, and he doesn't know what happened. But he wakes up in a crashed car. Probably should see a doctor, but instead, I mean, he's in the middle of the forest, so he's like, I'm just gonna walk that way.
Now, there is something I want to bring up real quick, which is real fast on this: the tutorial for this game. The tutorial for everything you'll need to know in the game happens at the very beginning, and with the exception of driving, which kind of makes sense for the game. But you'll going through that, you'll understand that the tutorial points out light is important. You use the light to fight off shadows, and then when they have a physical form, you can just blow them away. Very Ghostbusters like in that sort of sense.
I do get the feeling that Ghostbusters was an influence. Yeah.
Because Ghostbusters, the whole thing is first we got to sap these ghosts for power, and then we just trap them in, lock them away. But it's a two-step stage thing for it, which I always thought was an interesting like aspect to the game. There's other games that do something like similar to that, but also this you have a weird narrator that points out stay in the light. The light will keep you alive. The light's important. Rubbing this in, and it won't make sense now, but it'll make sense later. Very like Mufasa-esque, giving you some advice.
Don't forget your batteries.
Oh yeah, and don't forget your router. Speaking of product placement in this,
That was a really fun one that did not make it into the remaster, actually, because they didn't have those they didn't have those license agreements anymore. So now it's just like
Just
fictional
alkaline.
well, it's like a fictional battery brand, and then all of the Verizon ads are actually just now like really like cool painted ads for bright.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so they changed it up, but but it's kind of an interesting thought because because of the way the game has to be remastered. This is the first time like they had to take advertisements out of the game in order to remaster the game because that's a separate right that you would have to get permission for.
Similar thing with Crazy Taxi games. They had like KFC ads and stuff in the past, and I don't think those were re-upped for the Xbox 360 re-releases.
Correct.
I remember there was the same thing with Sonic Adventure. They used to have there was like a big thing called soap shoes, which was the shoes that Sonic was wearing.
Sonic Adventure
that
2.
let him grind on rails. I think the company might have went defunct. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I think that's the. Oh no! Wait, they are still around.
Yeah, when Sonic Adventure got remade, all of those soap advertisements that were in game were no longer there.
Yeah. Now we'll go into an episode about advertisements in video games and such in another episode. That's already that we're already working on. But back to Alan Wake. My point is that you'll understand everything from the tutorial. So yeah, Alan has to see a doctor, or move on with things.
He ends up going to a convenience store, but that's because he's actually trying to find his way. He sees the lights of a radio station in the distance and is like, I gotta go that way.
Yeah.
Because there's got to be somebody there who can help me figure out what's going on and where is my wife. As at this point, he doesn't realize that 7 days have passed that he doesn't remember.
Because I think after this, he goes to the radio station is the next sort of area?
No, he goes to the radio station's not for a while. He's just following the lights of the radio station, trying to get there. He does end up at a convenience store, which is where the sign outside says 7 days until Deerfest, but when him and Alice got there, it was 2 weeks until Deerfest. So he is like, oh my god, I'm missing a week. He goes inside, looks around at some various things, and then police sheriff Sarah Breaker shows up, and he's like, oh my god, help me find my wife. And as far as she can tell, he's babbling nonsense because she's like, there is no cabin on Cauldron Lake. He's like, my wife and I were literally staying there.
Well,
and so she takes him to the edge of Cauldron Lake, and there's no island there. She said it disappeared in the 70s, I think, due to volcanic activity, I think.
Yeah, no. It's volcanic activity and the whole thing wiped out. There used to be a thing there, but it's not there no more. And Alan's like, oh no. And then he takes Alan to the police station.
Yeah, he just doesn't know, he doesn't know, how this could be possible because he and Alice were literally there. So
and from, a storytelling perspective, that's actually really important and kind of clever. A lot of what drives the story in Alan Wake is him trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
Yes.
Because the game showed us, here's our normal, here's our cabin on the lake, here's, kind of our setup with the husband and wife and da-da-da-da-da. And then we instantly transition to 7 days. Alan doesn't know what happened during these 7 days. Neither do we, the players. We are just as lost as he is. We are feeling the same things that he is feeling. We're presented with this thing that doesn't match up with what we were shown early. We want to find out the mystery.
Yeah, and that's always a really fun narrative technique is if you're writing a character that's existed in this world or in whatever world you've created. We find out as we go, like what's going on and who's, what's happening. But when you have the character finding out alongside you, well, now we're both in this together.
Now, as he's known as for Alan Wake as a writer, but he always will quote things from Stephen King, and because Stephen King is a very prolific mystery.
He is the horror writer.
He is the horror writer. Yeah.
We don't quote Dean Koontz in this house.
But no, Stephen King, and he's got different references and things to Stephen King's material on. But also, some of the biggest references that they have or inspirations is Stephen King novels, and a lot of their novels come up as little bits of mystery while there's something supernatural that's happening in there. And if you haven't read the novels, don't worry. There's a whole series of Stephen King based novel movies. Not all of them good. I'm going to put that out there. Like The Shining, a very good movie. Maximum Overdrive, not a very good movie. And that one was directed by Stephen King.
That might have something to be said there too, because isn't The Shining like a Kubrick film?
Oh yeah, The Shining is a Stanley Kubrick's film.
It's more a matter of one's directorial capabilities than it is about the story itself in these respects.
Just because you know how to write a story doesn't mean you know how to direct the movie.
Exactly.
If you want a weird example for it, the entire Ghostbusters, the video game, when that came out, before they even made the game, they wanted a script written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, who wrote the original Ghostbusters film and Ghostbusters 2. So they took that treatment and then basically gamed it up to make it work for a video game on that. But normally you don't do that. A lot of places will or get influence from another source because it's harder to switch gears from one media to another like that.
Yeah, I think the only reason it even worked in the case of the Ghostbusters game, though, is simply because they didn't write it carte blanche, I believe, if I remember correctly. It was effectively like the 3 scripts that Bill Murray rejected when it came to making a true third Ghostbusters film. They kind of chopped up and made work as a game's narrative instead. That was my understanding of it. But, I mean, you have to still write between the lines.
But another big one is Twilight Zone. It's a horror. It's an anthology series from the 50s. Here's the thing about that: if you ever go back to watching the Twilight Zone, whether it's the remake, the other remake, or the original, a lot of those short story and analogy stuff still holds up to today's writing and suspense too. Some of them are really freaky. So these are sort of the last big influence, and this is probably why it's in the Washington area, is Twin Peaks. Back in the 90s, Twin Peaks was an entirely developed mystery show, and that was done. You would see back then, you would see the episode on whatever night it came on. You would talk about it for 2 or 3 days afterwards, and they were Twin Peaks watch parties to understand the mystery. This is before we had things like Lost or shows like
internet.
Shows like Stranger Things or the internet. And so
internet was not. I think the internet was just
infancy.
Getting to be more of like a household thing.
The internet existed,
households.
but they weren't streaming crap.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Nobody had the bandwidth to stream a show like a full 20-minute video. No, my internet can't handle that. It's like 20 bits a second. That's not.
We'll see you in about 15 minutes, and that picture will have probably loaded for you.
Yeah. But no, these are a lot of the influences that they have, but Twin Peaks was a very big mystery show, and it still holds up its mystery pretty well. It's one of those few shows, like, if you're introducing it to somebody, don't spoil it. Let them experience this whole mystery of what digs at them.
Now, to add
who did
to
kill
this,
Laura Palmer?
Nobody cares who killed Laura Palmer. Everyone just wants to know what's going on about the coffee. Now,
it's a damn.
It's a damn fine coffee.
Exactly. But to lead into the whole influence of Twin Peaks, you've got the game being presented in an episodic manner, but it's not released as such. It's a 6-episode game that you can literally binge, and then not long after that, you had the takeoff popularity of Telltale's episodic games getting very, very popular, and
Mhm.
those were just bit by bit by bit. So it's an interesting way for them to kind of present it more as a television show, and that kind of helped, I guess, tie more links to the influences of Twin Peaks.
Mhm.
To be honest, I felt that was very strange when I first played the game
And so did
because
I.
you would finish a quote unquote episode and then you'd immediately go into last time on Alan Wake or whatever the
Yeah,
heck it was that
Yeah.
they did,
like you'd
and it
actually
didn't.
have a next time on Alan Wake, immediately followed by a previously on Alan Wake. It's like,
Yeah,
I know, shut up, I just did this.
it
Yeah,
was so confusing and surreal, and I understood what they were trying to do, but it for me it honestly took me out of the game.
A little
It
bit,
yeah.
made
I
me
yeah.
think I
question
think it's more
what the heck was going
useful
on.
if you like have stepped away from the game for a while
Oh
and are
yeah,
trying.
that's critical. I think for games that if you've turned the game off and you come back, I wish that every game would give you a little synopsis of what has happened to help catch you back up. But
Dude,
they're doing it mid play session.
imagine having that kind of power in the 90s on your PlayStation or in the early 2000s on your PS2 with an RPG. You're like, okay, where the fuck was I going?
Oh
It's
God,
been a week. I am screwed.
sometimes I still feel that way. I'll go back to a game. I've been playing a game called Scarlet Nexus, and I really love it. It's super fun and interesting. I haven't played it in a while, and now I'm afraid to touch it because I'm like, I think I'm gonna have to restart it when I get there.
The Tales games actually have the best answer to that, at least the more modern ones on the
Mhm.
PS3 and so on. There's actually a button that just tells you where do you need to go next, and it's literally just like a journal entry kind of thing. It's like,
Mhm.
we're on our way to blah 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 blah. Make your way here.
Yeah,
It's like,
Mhm.
thank God.
yeah, but
I I
I
really
do think
liked Return to Monkey Island does that
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you load up the game, it'll it shows you the the bigger scope narrative where it's Guybrush telling this story to his kid, and he'll just be like, "Hey, do you remember where we left off?" And then you
oh,
can
that's
say yes
cute.
or no. If I remember what we were doing. Let's just skip that. Or actually, you know what? It's been a while. Maybe you could catch me up real quick. And then it's just like 2 or 3 lines from Guybrush, kind of explaining what happened and what's relevant to you right now, and they go right into the game.
Mhm.
That's
Clever.
brilliant.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. Um, but yeah, so like
Yeah,
it's
Alan
weird
Wake
to have
was
that
doing it just to
disconnect.
be. Alan Wake was just doing it to mimic like the TV show element of, being similar to Twin Peaks, or even just like because it is very like cinematic in a lot of ways. Not
Mhm.
like
Oh yeah.
what's the what's the company that did like Detroit Become Human and
Quantic Dream.
Quantic Dream. Yeah, it's not like Quantic Dream where like
That it's a cinematic
it is a
experience.
cinematic experience 100% of the time, but like,
QTE the game.
it is very, Alan Wake is very beautiful and very cinematic in a lot of ways, and so I bet that they were just kind of like leaning into that. But yeah, it is a little jarring to be like previously on Alan Wake and you're like, I just saw this.
Yeah. Well, they did also make efforts to recreate some camera tricks. Like I believe there's a few moments where like they do a slow zoom on Alan with a zoom out of the background, and that's a camera trick that's that's done with like specific lensing and twisting, I believe. But it's recreating that kind of element in a video game. Not only can I only imagine is a pain in the ass, uh, but it also does add to the televised kind of feel, the
The
element
almost novella or
of this mystery show.
because that's the thing. It's supposed to mimic a mystery show, and that's why it's doing what it's doing on this.
Yeah, like we all want to know what happened to Alice, what's going on
Mhm.
with Alan, why are we, why is Sheriff Breaker here? Where did Cauldron Lake go? Or sorry, the cabin on Bird Leg Cabin is what it's called.
Yeah, and I think after the police station, Alan ends up leaving because he gets information about about his wife. I think being kidnapped.
Well, he gets so he's still in touch with who he believes is the kidnapper of his wife. And so he gets his phone back. He gets a call from the kidnapper and the kidnapper's like, "Hey, come out back. I've got something I want you to see." And so Alan goes out back of the police station, and Alice's driver's license is on the seat of just a car that's stored back there.
Yeah, And he's like,
And so he's like, "You son of a bitch!"
I'll get you. No, you can't get me now. You're gonna have to wait until it's dark. And then time progresses. Side note: there's three things I've seen in the Alan Wake that makes it so either A, time has to progress till night because he has to wait for something, or B, he's knocked out until nightfall. You know,
Yeah.
because
The
one of the
creepy
things that
time
I
of
thought was
day.
hilarious is Alan Wake has got sleeping problems along with this. He can't fall asleep. However, apparently forced sleep is something that he gets all the time in this game.
Is also super bad for you.
I
Oh
don't know
yeah,
that
Yeah,
that's
I was going to
true.
say concussion sleep is not as good for you as regular sleep.
I don't
Now-
think he has sleeping problems.
no, he does. It's one of
Yeah,
the
he
reasons.
suffers from insomnia, I think.
Yeah, he suffers from insomnia, and part of that's because of his writer's block.
I think
I
it's
don't-
affecting his writing
sleep.
capability is what it
Mhm.
comes
I
down
don't recall
to.
that in the slightest.
See, I'm just speculating.
Hang
But,
on.
Yeah,
I know I know it's 2 against 1 here, but I do have to. I'm going to have to trust Liz on this one,
Mhm.
who has played Alan Wake more times than the 3 of us combined.
you're not
That's true.
wrong. But it would also lend credence
Mhm.
to another thing, which is that the game was originally designed to have a full day-night cycle, and I think that that's kind of a clever way of incorporating things with that cycle would have been for Alan to not be able to sleep, and that's
Mhm.
why he's up forever. But again, that could just be me crossing
Well, and I mean, from a
lines with
gameplay
the history of
perspective,
it.
I do have
from a
an update.
gameplay perspective, a day-night cycle I don't think would have been particularly good
No.
because so much of the symbolism is tied up in this whole light versus darkness thing.
That's exactly what
story
they
happens
realized
at
in
night.
development.
You know, I mean, yes, there are things that you do during the day, but that's like, you know, your sort of your lulls in action. The real story, the real things that we are here for, that we want to experience, those are happening at night.
I do have an update, sort of. It's the only thing that I could find about it, and it is the Amazon description of Alan Wake on the 360, so I don't know how accurate this is.
Okay.
It says that, because it also says that he moved to the small town of Bright Falls
And
after
it is very
suffering.
clearly vacation.
Yeah, after suffering from insomnia and depression. But then it says he's able to sleep again, but after he meets a mysterious woman, he begins to have terrible nightmares. That's not true. That's not accurate at all. As he puts these nightmares on paper for a new book, that's not what he was doing. I'm gonna call shenanigans.
Methinks the person writing the back of the case should maybe, I don't know, turn on the game at least once.
It's not even the back of the case. It's
Yeah.
literally just the Amazon description, like user inputted Amazon description.
Okay,
Mhm.
well then maybe they should, I don't know, watch the E3 trailer or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Alan Wake has insomnia with a grain of salt, and if I'm wrong, I humbly accept that I am wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
The word insomnia does not appear anywhere on Alan Wake's entry in the Alan Wake wiki, so I'm going to say that no, he does not have insomnia.
Okay.
All right. Looks like I might have to play this game again.
Oh no.
However,
I'll
he does
play
get
it.
forced sleep. He gets knocked out a lot.
That's true. That's true. He got
He gets unhealthy sleep.
Yeah, he gets knocked out. He hits water from a dangerously high place.
Mhm.
More
Oh,
knocked
so he's just
out.
dead.
Oh,
No.
drunk
So what happens is
at one
after he leaves
point.
the police
Well, actually,
station.
some fan theories do state that.
Oh yes, of
Um,
course. This is the squall
The
is dead
squall is
theory,
dead.
yes.
Well, so here's the thing. After he leaves the police station, he goes after the dude who says that he has his wife. Turns out he meets up with him at the end of near a waterfall. Now, if you know
It's
literary
not a
history,
waterfall.
what?
It's not a waterfall.
All right. Oh, it's a shoot. What is it?
It's a cliff.
Is there water at the bottom?
Yes,
Yeah.
there is cliff. It's a cliff overlooking a lake by Dr. Hartman's facility, but that is not until after the radio station.
Oh yeah. Okay. Wait. Yeah. So he goes chasing the. So I guess he goes chasing out down to make his way to the radio station at this point. Then.
Yes. So the kidnapper says to meet him after dark, by Lover's Peak, which is wait. Oh no, that's later. He goes to the radio station. He goes to Cauldron Lake with the sheriff after she gets him at the convenience store, and then you go to the sheriff's office, find Alice's ID, all the stuff. But he's waiting. He's trying to figure out what he can do and where he can go, and he decides he's going to go talk to Pat Maine at the radio station, just to see if there's if he has any information or anything at all. And Pat Maine is the night show host. He always hosts the radio show After Dark, and he loves it. He's been doing it for a long time, and
he's hosting he's like one of those late night radios, the Night Owl, where random people will call in and talk about random things. If you ever stayed up way too late at night and decided, I'll turn on the radio. Oh, what's this? Someone telling me a story about werewolves? Where did you come from? What's happening here?
I always love late night stuff like that. But Pat Maine he really is just playing music and chit-chatting to whoever's awake. And a lot of it ends up being because it's such a small town and everyone knows everyone, people are calling in and they're like one guy calls in and is like, my dog got off leash, and normally he comes back, but I couldn't find him. And then, Pat's like, oh, she's a real sweet, curious dog, but I'm sure she'll come home, but we'll all keep an eye out for her. So, that's the kind of call he gets. Later on, you find out that the dog was eaten by the darkness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the themes that the themes of darkness isn't just a theme. Alan Wake is literally fighting the darkness.
Yeah.
Darkness is a monster infecting people, doing bad things.
They're called the Taken. When you get infected by the darkness, and then the dark presence is the big one who's doing the infecting and such, and then the dark place is something completely different.
And then Alan shows up and shoves a flashlight in your face and pops a gun in your head.
Yeah, but that doesn't even kill the darkness.
Mm-mm. You can't stop the darkness. So after so he meets up with at the radio station, and at this point I think at the radio station he the federal agent Nightingale shows up.
Yes. So Nightingale shows up, and I think he'd actually kind of shown up a little bit before, but this is where I think he'd just been mentioned that an FBI agent was in. This is where he shows up. And the way he shows up is he thinks Pat Maine kind of spilled that Alan was in the studio. And Nightingale shows up and just shoots into the building. Just guns ablazing, and Pat is like, dude, the hell? So Alan gets away, but you hear Pat being like, why are you waving guns around like that? Have some, you could have killed somebody in here.
You could just use the door. The door is not even locked. What?
Yeah, just literally grab some agents and surround the building or something. But he gets scolded by Sarah Breaker, but he doesn't care. He's there to do a job.
And from there, he starts making his way to Lover's Peak. And once at Lover's Peak, he finds the dude who, quote unquote, has his wife. Yeah, he don't have his wife.
Yeah, this dude was just told to lure Alan there, and he was gonna get money or something, but Alan figures that he's just oh, I don't actually have her, and Alan gets pissed, and he tackles the dude off the edge of a cliff, and they hit the water below. And when Alan wakes up, he's in Dr. Hartman's clinic, which is where where Alice wanted him to go anyway, at least to talk to the doctor. And they're just no, your wife died in a tragic accident, and you've been in my clinic for a long time, and we just have to get you through all these delusions. Straight up lying to Alan.
Straight up gaslighting him at this point, I believe.
No.
Well, it depends how long he sees saying that he's been in the psych ward. He's been in the psych ward for or in this psychiatric care. If it's a few hours, kinda.
Well, he's because Alan has, he doesn't know if this is true, and he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe Hartman for a second, but there is a part of him that's like, what if it's true? And then he's like, no, that's stupid. And um
That'd be lazy writing.
that'd be so dumb. And it's true. It's just Dr. Hartman trying to take advantage of various artists. He wants to get famous off of artists, and he wants to, like, I don't know, study
He
them
wants
and whatever.
to. So there's people out there, which is sort of the case. The most famous one I can think of is the Colonel. He's the manager of Elvis Presley, but he's not Elvis Presley. He's just the manager on it, and ended up, depending on how you take it, has kind of screwed over the Elvis family's fortune, because when he passed away in the 70s, Elvis left to his daughter and wife not a whole lot of stuff in comparison to all the money that he made. But the Colonel's famous for just being there as the manager, and Elvis had a whole entourage that people knew them by name. But they're famous for being with the guy who is famous, not for actually doing anything with that.
Yeah, and this guy just, like, he wants to be a part of the artist's life so that he can, I don't know, like, he's not a creative type. And so he started this clinic for the artists. And I think, like, I might have to double check, but I think that, like, I don't think he was, like, tainted by the dark presence. The dark presence
Oh
doesn't
no,
give a
he's
shit
just a
about
jerk.
him. But he, like, he definitely is coinciding with what the dark presence is doing there. And yeah, like, he has his clinic for the artists, and at least one of the artists that we know about ends up in the clinic, and that's Odin and Tor from the beginning. They've actually been in this clinic for a good while now. And they get out every so often, but you find out, I don't know exactly when it is, it might be later, but you find out that the dark presence did try to take them, but they were too drunk all the time. And the
They
dark
partied
presence,
up like rock stars.
yeah, and they made their own moonshine, which is stronger than most alcohols. And so they, like, brewed it themselves on the Anderson farm. And so they were too drunk. The dark presence couldn't get a hold of them.
When
So,
it's time to party, they will party hard.
oh yeah.
See,
And
I kind of like that because I mean a lot of the story that's happening is kind of this Lovecraftian style thing. You know, the darkness is some sort of unknowable entity
Right.
we can't really wrap our heads around.
Hmm.
And that's like a big part of the Lovecraftian style of horror is that's what's scary is not being able to comprehend something. You
Fear
know,
of
that
unknown kind of deal.
Very
yeah.
much so.
And so like what's the solution to that? Well, you can't drive me crazy if I'm drunk.
yeah.
And
And they
if
were
you're
like,
drunk,
Crazy
you
if I'm
just kind
already
of
crazy.
yeah, you're drunk. You're already not thinking straight. You just kind of accept what's going on in front of you,
yeah.
or don't punch it. But you don't have the higher cognitive functions that might make you question your reality and what you're seeing.
Yeah, and these guys sure didn't. Like, they were just already, living the rock and roll lifestyle,
Because that's what
because
got
they're
him there
like,
in the first place.
well, they're like, because they're older, like, they're pretty old guys, even in the setting of Alan Wake, and they were probably in the 70s and 80s, metal scene where
Oh,
it
yeah.
really was sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Mhm.
And what's really interesting about the band, the Old Gods of Asgard, is that so this is jumping a little bit ahead, but you find out in Alan Wake's American Nightmare that they actually are going back on tour with Barry as their manager. And
I don't like it, Al.
that's 3 years after the events of Alan Wake. And then they actually, so Poets of the Fall is the band, like, it's
That
Poets of the
represents
Fall.
them.
Yeah, in game it's the Old Gods of Asgard. Well, they're releasing a new album as the Old Gods of Asgard with like 8 tracks made specifically for Alan Wake 2. So
Nice.
those guys are ancient and still killing it.
But yeah, they did a lot of the music for Alan Wake, and feels to the atmosphere of Alan Wake, which is what I really love. Like, if there's one thing the game of Alan Wake has gotten spades, it's just the atmosphere, that creepy feeling of the darkness, that mystery, what's happening behind this door, that something is out there. It just, in that dark forest, it just feels. And so they
Yeah,
have a lot of that atmosphere for it, which I love.
The first time I played through Alan Wake was with my sister and her boyfriend, and we did play one chapter a night, except I think the last two we did it at the same time because
The chapters are progressively get longer and longer as you go.
No, well, the last one isn't that long, actually.
They're inconsistent in length, unfortunately.
Sort of. I mean, I think that they're generally similar in length, except towards the end, where you do get I think chapter 5 is longer, and then chapter 6 is pretty short. But we played one chapter a night, and I stayed with them for a whole week just to play this game with them. And every single night, we'd play a chapter, I'd, go to bed, and I would have the weirdest dreams every single night that we played it. And for the first couple, I've played it countless times. And the first couple of years that I replayed it, I would still have those strange, not those same strange dreams, but I would still just have really weird dreams every time I played it.
Cthulhu reaching into your mind.
Now, one thing I do need to mention is that the reason why Nightingale's interested in Alan Wake, and also one of the reasons why why Dr. I can't remember his name.
Hartman.
Dr. Hartman even hears that Alan Wake might be onto something is because Dr. Hartman finds parts of his manuscript. And one of two things I love about the manuscript, I find using certain items in game that are actually in the storyline that is also tied to an achievement, a fun way to do that. Roguelike games, especially now with stuff like Risk of Rain in series and going forward, they do that. Your achievements are tied to your link. But in this case, not only is the achievement tied to it, the manuscript itself is also tied to the world of to the lore of Alan Wake, and also to the game.
Yeah, that's exactly what, that's kind of the point of it, is Alan's finding these manuscript pages that are detailing things that end up happening. And that's what's also really confusing to him. And so there's Nightingale finds he finds some of these pages. I think he was in so Alan actually wrote him there. That's one of the things, is because Alan wrote this manuscript in those 7 days, and he he wrote it with Barbara Jagger was making him write it. The dark presence using Barbara Jagger's body made him write the manuscript pages because she wanted him to write her properly into existence. She's too weak right now, and she relies on, or I guess the presence is probably not a she, I don't know, but it relies on something to bring it to life. And that's why she focuses on artists, is because creatively, that's a really good way to bring something to life.
Basically, what's the key to this manuscript and the key to the darkness is writers and artists, creative types, ones that are so creative that they can bring their that they can put their creativity and make it a reality. In Alan's case, he's a writer, so he writes novels.
In those 7 days, he was writing things that were going to happen to bring Barbara, or to bring the dark presence properly into the world where it can start wreaking havoc. But Alan woke up from this the brainwashing, or the trance that he was in, and realized what was happening, and was oh, I got to get out of here. So he wrote himself out of the dark place and back into existence. But what he did is, because he was I have to make it creative, I have to make it clever, because if I just say, and I got out,
that's bad writing. I left.
And that's the thing, is he actually says that, that's one of the things specifically, is that it's bad writing, and nobody's gonna believe that it's real if it's, or that it's convincing or whatever, if it's written poorly. So he really is that is exactly it, is he needs to make it believable, so it doesn't like throw anybody for a loop, but especially so that the dark presence doesn't know what he's doing. And so he starts writing like Nightingale into the picture, and he like everything that happens in Alan Wake, Alan made happen. And so Nightingale showing up 100% in the manuscript. Nightingale
Nightingale's
showed
not a real person.
he is a real person. It's just that Alan manipulated he either like wrote him into existence and now he's a real person, or he was already a real person and Alan just wrote him here, and was like, hey, you need to investigate this writer because you found these manuscript pages and it's real shady, and now you think because you're finding these manuscript pages that are, you know, later on than what we've caught up to, now it looks like Alan is plotting murder.
Yeah. So I love it because the manuscript is different for the way each person interprets it. Nightingale's going crazy because
I'm gonna
he's like,
argue that it's not how people interpret it. He lays it out pretty clearly what
no,
happens.
no. It's how people find the manuscript is how they're seeing it. So like Nightingale sees the manuscript and sees that Nightingale's written in the manuscript, but Nightingale doesn't know, am I here because you wrote me here, or am I here because I'm a person, but the manuscript says I'm supposed to be. It's like reading your own future.
He just, well, so he shows up there. I don't think that he just wonders how Alan knows who he is and what he's going to do. I don't he's not really in a place where he's like, oh my god, am I real? Like, he's not having that existential crisis. He really is just like, you know, oh, I gotta go to Bright Falls to blah blah blah. And then he finds the manuscript page and he's like, how do you know me? How do you know what's gonna happen? You know, and he keeps calling him like he calls him other authors' names the whole time.
What are you talking about here, Dean Koontz? That's not me again.
And so yeah, he's just there to try and figure out why he is there. Sort of. And then when he finds the manuscript pages, it's exactly how Alan wrote it and planned it.
That would be so weird though. I'm reading a page that says, I find this manuscript. I'm questioning why I'm reading these pages right now. While I'm questioning writing these pages, reading the manuscript.
I actually do. It's not right now. It's actually when you go back to the police station later. I have my favorite manuscript page that I want to read aloud because it is one of the ones that makes Nightingale be like, what the whole entire hell is this?
But like, I bring this up because Hartman finds a couple of the manuscript script pages, and from Hartman's point of view, Alan might start writing. But if Alan starts writing, he can't write those tales.
Yeah, and so he's drugging him, keeping him in his clinic, lying to him and being like, you just need to keep writing your manuscript, Alan. Like, we've already got so much going, just finish it up. And then that way he can be like, I'm the artist that rehabilitated Alan Wake.
I'm the guy who helped Alan Wake.
I did it.
Then the darkness says, nay, sir, for I need Alan Wake. And totally trashes the entire clinic and building while he's going out. And at this point, Alan's realizing that he needs to figure out what's going on. And my two favorite things about it is that the reason why Alan doesn't tell a lot of people what's going on is because he knows they're not going to believe him. This is already... What are they going to do? Put him back in that clinic? No, he needs to keep moving. And I believe he bumps into Barry at this point, which...
in the when Alan's escaping the war, because it's not what Hartman thinks it is. It's not, and it's not going to play out how Hartman wants while the dark presence is on the hunt for Alan, because he got away from her. He's the one that got away.
He's the one that got away. I need to get back.
And so the dark presence is like attacking is like sending Taken to attack the lodge, or like the I guess it's the lodge, his clinic. And
his clinic.
Yeah, when Alan finally escapes the clinic and goes outside, he meets up with Barry, and Barry's gonna try and get him out. But you have to go through a garden maze and fight a very annoying fight.
But skipping all of those annoying fights, because we're only so long of a podcast, we get to Alan Wake getting to Barry, and then Alan Wake going to, or Alan's like, I gotta convince Barry to help me out by letting him know that the darkness is a thing, it's real, and Barry's like, nah, you're crazy, and then the darkness throws his car. After which is one of my favorite things with Barry. Anytime you see him at night, he's covered in Christmas lights, and he's got light bulbs tied to his head. He is ready to go. He
He got himself a headlamp just so he could be like, oh, I'm surviving this.
Like, I always kind of felt like, standing next to Barry, I'm just like, I feel kind of unprepared. I feel like I could have done more.
And Alan was even like, I want a headlamp. And he's like, last one, buddy.
I could have done more. You could have. You didn't.
You didn't.
You want.
But you want your protagonist. I think that's part of it, though, is you want your protagonist to always be in a position of vulnerability, because then it keeps, the reader interested.
Sure.
But yeah, honestly, like.
And it did make me worry about Barry less. Like, yeah, I'm not going to have to hold this guy's hand and walk him through. He can take care of himself, I think. He's got lights.
Yeah, he's good. He's a good
egg.
Yeah, but after they leave the ward, they end up at the Anderson Farm barn, which is the most out of place boss fight you will ever have in this entire game.
So cool though.
It's awesome.
It's totally on brand though. Like, you're not expecting it, but when you're at the farm of two drunk rock and roll gods or whatever, like they really set that place up for success. They have the stage and all the lights, and as soon as you get there and like Barry starts trying to like figure out how to open a gate or whatever, it just a bunch of Taken show up, and Barry's like, oh my god, let me figure out what I can do. Music starts playing, fireworks start going. Like,
lights are burning everywhere. There's a whole light show that's going on there.
It is so cool. It's a really good and really fun level. There is one that's sort of similar in control, but also just like so uniquely different that they both just stand out as really cool levels.
Look, no matter who or where you are or what you're playing, everybody wants to be a rock star just a little bit.
Yeah, everybody has that feeling, that thought. Like, even if you just want to be like a bassist or whatever, like, you don't want to be the lead singer. I wouldn't want to be the lead singer.
So when I got to this fight, it just because when you get to that fight, you're fighting a bunch of Taken, and the lights are going, which means I don't have to worry about lights or sounds or anything. And now all of a sudden, I'm like that Shaun of the Dead, or not Shaun of the Dead, like the meme that pops up that you see once in a while from Hot Fuzz. Shame, loads up the shotgun. Shame.
Yeah, like there's still like those moments of danger where you're like, oh my god, I don't have enough, whatever. But it's like just the right amount of panicking for such a cool level. And then at the very end, when the finale goes and it's just like a barrage of fireworks and it kills all of the Taken, and then you get to go and explore more of the farm. You find out that they have restored an old Viking boat and they have it hanging in their barn.
They're rock stars. They just keep it around, in case of a thing. But yeah. And so after you deal with the Anderson farm, then you move back. I think at that point you end up going back to the police station.
You do, but it's because you actually hear a really important piece of information. Alan and Barry get drunk and they find a record player playing an old gods of Asgard song, "The Poet and His Muse," which is about Thomas Zane, who nobody is supposed to know about. Because Thomas Zane, you find out later, wrote himself out of existence, but he did it in a very bad way, which is why he tried to write himself and Barbara Jagger, or the Dark Presence, completely out of existence. He did it poorly, and so he wasn't able to entrap it properly. So, I mean, we'll get to that in a little bit, but The Poet and His Muse is like, that's about Thomas Zane, who no one's supposed to know about, but the muse, or it talks about the lady of the light, and that's the lamp lady. And so that's your, they're like, oh my god, that's who it must be talking about. We got to find her. And then they're drunk and are like, tomorrow. And they pass out. Nightingale finds where they are and arrests them. And they wake up in the police station and just horribly hungover. And Barry's
Blackout
like,
drunk.
yeah, Barry's like, I'll never drink again. Lies, Barry. But Nightingale storms in and is like, what are you doing? How did you blah, blah, blah? And this is my favorite page. It's my favorite page ever in the whole in the whole game. It says, Nightingale tried to make sense of the manuscript. It was disjointed and strange. He didn't understand half of it, but it all rang true, impossibly true. He took out his hip flask when he reached the page that described how he reached the page that made him take out his hip flask. It wasn't the booze that made his mind reel. I love that page so much.
Oh, that is awesome, though.
It's such a good page. And you end up the dark presence actually ends up taking out Nightingale because Alan said to. The protagonist is allowed to have wins every so often. There is also a point, I'm gonna say, I don't remember exactly when this happens. I think we skipped over it, or maybe it is right after this. No, it's not right after this. You did actually end up in, or Alan and Barry actually wound up in Rose's trailer park where she lived, because she said that she had found his manuscript pages. And they're like, oh my god, like, thank god, we're on our way. And when they get there, they don't realize that she's been possessed by the dark presence. She drugs them. And Nightingale finds them there too.
Yep,
so it had to have been before this, because Nightingale doesn't show up after this. He did.
Yeah, he did. Nightingale gets taken away by the darkness, which at that point probably should have read that page in the manuscript. Gets taken away by the darkness. Missed a page. My bad.
Whoops.
Doodles.
But at that point, there comes a quest to try to track down the Lady of the Light. Which is the old lady that you bump into at the beginning at the diner.
Yeah, and they find out that I don't remember exactly how they find it out, but they find out that she's in the well-lit room. And she actually tells them that to get to the well-lit room. And she's like, I'll meet you there. Anyway,
it gets kind of wonky at that point, because you find out like there's a secret like society based upon this
it's only her.
Yeah.
But it's the well-lit room because she doesn't want there to be a single shadow so that the darkness can't get in at all. And so she has strung up in an old like
power plant.
Or it's a sewage. It's a big tunnel. It's a big pipe area. But anyway, you go over there and you find out that she has strung up thousands of light bulbs, and she has just been exhaustively keeping track of the lifespan of every light bulb, when they need to be replaced. She has them numbered. She knows where they are, and she's like, these need to be replaced soon. This one is over here. This stuff's here. I'm tired, and I'm done. I want to be done with this life now. She's been doing this since the 70s. So this game takes place in 2010. Like, girl's been at it for a good time. But you find out, this is where you actually get Thomas Zane's shoebox. And this is where you find out that he wrote himself out of existence. But that's what he did, is instead of being creative about it, he panicked and said, Thomas Zane and the dark presence no longer exist. Basically, like, maybe not quite that in those words, but that was the gist of it. And there was
blunt.
no nuance to it, no nothing, and that's not how it works. And so he didn't do a good job, but he did still write himself out of existence. So, but that was the compromise that he made, is he was like, okay, fine, I will leave. I will be completely gone. That's fine. But everything that I leave in this shoebox will be important. Like, this is the only thing of me that will remain. And in it is a manuscript page about Alan as a child, His father had left or died or something. We don't really know, but he was afraid of the dark, and his mother gave him the clicker, which was like an old light switch thing, but it was like one of those old light switches that you like click up and down. And she gave it to him and was like, your father's watching over you, whatever. Just click this when you feel afraid in the dark, and there'll be a light, to help you or whatever. And then is the clicker. So there's that page and the clicker. So then you realize, did Thomas Zane write Alan into existence? Like, was he like, yes, this person needs, or somebody needs to have this child in particular? Or did Alan Wake write Thomas Zane into existence, who then time looped it? I don't know. I think that Thomas Zane is the actual one that
is the actual
that
writer.
He actually is the one that influenced the influence. Oh my god, he influenced the existence of Alan and then getting to this place. So like everything in Alan's life up to that point has pretty much been orchestrated to some degree by Thomas Zane. And so
including the writer's block to give him an excuse to come here to Brightwall.
Yes. So, Alan's mind is reeling, understandably so.
He's had a couple of weeks.
He's going through some time. And so Alan's like, okay, I know what I have to do. I have to get rid of the dark presence. Like, this is what, like, he's like, I got some weird things going on in my brain, but I know what I have to do right now to save my wife, Bright Falls, and potentially the world, although he's not thinking that large scale. He really is just like,
this
my
will
wife,
help me save my wife.
Yeah, my wife and probably the people of this town. So he is the one who goes. It's a long trek to the end. Lots of fighting, lots of enemies. But you do end up getting to the end of the game where blah, 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 things happen. I don't want to go too far into it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But he ends up back in log cabin. Oh my god. Bird leg cabin. I'm here. He ends up back in Bird Leg cabin where he and Alice were in the beginning. And he finds Barbara Jagger. And he realizes what he has to do. So he with the clicker in hand, he shoves his hand into her chest, clicks the clicker, which does actually just explode into light inside of her, which weakens her enough. So then he goes back to the typewriter and he starts writing creatively enough that he will take Alice's place. So Alice escapes the dark place where she has been held for the last week and handful of days. And she doesn't know what happened. She has no recollection of it. She swims to the surface, calls for her husband, swims to the shore, and is just like, what, like, I don't know. I lost the last like 14 or 15 days or whatever. And now Alan is stuck in the dark place. And when we get a nice zoom out, Nightingale's not dead, by the way. I was wrong about that. Nightingale got pulled away and is now infected with the dark presence. So it like when Alan like quote unquote killed it body hopped to Nightingale, and Rose is now the new Lady of the Light, and she's seen at the very end. It's Deerfest, everyone's celebrating. She's seen holding a lantern, and Nightingale is in the building behind her in the darkness looking menacing. Honestly, I feel like like that's the end of that. I feel like we can kind of brush over the writer and the signal. To be perfectly honest, they really are a little bit like, they're really interesting, but they are very fillery, just to kind of show, like, explore how weird the dark place is, and also how like a little bit more about Mr. Scratch, who becomes a villain in American Nightmare, and just like Alan's mental state. Like he's really not having a good go of it in the dark place for, initially. He doesn't quite yet know how to survive a place like that. So his mind's not all there.
So here's the important thing for it. The darkness needs the darkness itself in this case is ethereal. It is very much a Lovecraftian based story. It's a monster that doesn't have a present, doesn't have a physical form. What the darkness wants is to get out, to be a physical form, to stop being this entity for the most part. But to be not an entity, it needs something creative to do this. Thomas Zane was a poet and wrote different poetry, but Thomas Zane couldn't do the job. Unfortunately, like,
So what happened with Thomas Zane is that the dark presence, or the dark the dark presence kind of made a good and bad move in wearing Barbara Jagger's like body as the host, because Barbara Jagger and Thomas Zane were in love. And so when Barbara Jagger gets taken over and starts telling him to do these things, he's like, yes, of course, I love her. I would do anything for her. And it isn't until too late that he realizes that this is not his Barbara anymore.
mhm.
Also, the lantern lady, the lady of the light, was also in love with Thomas Zane, but nothing ever happened with them. Like, she wasn't really on his radar,
Well,
because he was
yeah,
so
because
in love
see,
with
he's
Barbara Jagger.
well, yeah, because he's a poet. He's not a sitcom writer because this is a Three's Company company plot.
Well, and initially, yes, he was very like, absolutely, I'll do whatever my Barbara wants, blah blah blah, and then realizes this isn't my Barbara, and I've made a huge mistake because now I realize what's going on. And in that moment, he's like, I have to put an end to this. And that's when he made his mistake of just being like, he panicked and was like, okay, and we no longer exist. Bye.
My
Me.
um, and so the darkness gets held off for years and years and years. Like, okay, don't worry, I found another creative use people group that is just as artistic, very creative, and they're drunk all the time. They're
Yeah.
drinking right now.
It's pretty implied that like it has tried over the years to grasp onto different
Artists.
artist
Mhm.
types, because like those are the ones that would just, I think, have the easier time to write or to bring something like that to life. But like it didn't gain enough power from Odin and Thor because they were drunk, and painters, like, it didn't find that it could latch on to like the paintings as well and what have you. Like, the written word kind of seemed to be the most powerful way to bring it to life the way that it wanted.
And what it
uh
was looking for is a successful writer. And Alan Wake has written multiple hit novels.
he
And
has
so,
5 out, at the 5 Alex Casey novels out. He has written for Night Springs. He wrote an episode of Night Springs back when Barry first, so him and Barry are childhood friends. Barry actually got Alan a writing gig on Night Springs, and Alan wrote 1 episode, which we never see in game. And he submitted things to like publication magazines and short stories and essays and things like that. But
mhm.
now he's a famous writer.
Yeah, different writers and such and creatives, I think, will always take certain weird aspects and things. Like, one of the biggest comic writers right now was the same guy who's the creator and executive of Babylon 5, of that series. And you get to see all these, like, kind of these creative types work on what they need to for these to try to bring that darkness out. Um but that's where it sort of gets really interesting on it, because Alan Wake knows horror writing, and if you've watched or enough horror stories or know enough about horror books and novels, no one gets out clean. That was one of the mistakes with Thomas Zane. He wanted, all right, and we're good, and everyone out.
Yeah, and that was like the opening narration
Mhm.
in Alan Wake actually says like, you can't give people like answers, because answers are antithetical to the poetry of fear, is actually exactly what he says. And I think it's a Stephen King quote.
Mhm.
And we actually discussed this a little bit in my narrative design class recently. Um, when you're doing like your writing and your world building and all of that, it's sort of like an iceberg. What the player sees is maybe 10% of what there is. You never want to give them the whole story, because it's not as satisfying.
Mhm.
And if you don't give them the whole story, that gives them a chance to like talk about it. The things that they don't see where they want to try and connect the dots, that gets people talking about it. It makes it more popular, more entertaining, allows fans to interact with each other. So that's critical, not just in horror stories, but in any
It's true. When Harry Potter was being released, I started reading the books when I was in 8th grade, I believe, and the fourth book had just oh no, it was the fourth book was still coming out soon. And like, that series at the time, was very influential on a lot of people. And also just like having mysteries that wove throughout all of the books. Like my parents and I would sit down to dinner and just discuss what we thought was going to happen,
Mhm.
and who we thought would be the next casualty and whatever. And so like you really can get people talking by having those really good like mysteries. And by the end of the series you want to have all the answers, but then you get to talk about like the journey and what you thought along the way. um Recently I read Gone Girl, by Gillian Gillian Flynn, or Gillian Flynn. I don't actually know. It's with a G, so I don't actually know how to pronounce that one.
Sure.
Um, and that one, like, was such a good book. It was so tense and so interesting, and like, I ended up not being able to stop reading at the end of chapters because they were all cliffhangers, and I would just be like, one more chapter, one more chapter. So I would have to leave off mid chapter because then I wouldn't have that one more chapter moment. Um, but it was the ending. Like, you get all the answers by the end. Like, you figure out what's been going on, you understand the reasons why things are happening, how messed up it is. Like, oh my god, it was so interesting. But when you get to the ending, like the final page, the way it leaves off is like, it's not a happy ending. Like, it's like tragic in a way that you don't expect it to be tragic. And like, that was so interesting because immediately, even though I finished it at like midnight, I wanted to call my sister, who had also read the book
Mhm.
a while ago, and I wanted to talk to her about it. I didn't because it was midnight. But like, that was the thing, is I finished it and was like, I want to know her take on this. I want to know what she thought of the ending and what does she think it means. And like, the author was even like, It's really simple. Like, it means what you want it to mean. Like, what I intended, like, that's out of my hands. When you have an like when you have an open ending like that, and then you
Mhm.
give it to the world, what you intended doesn't matter at that point.
Mhm.
And she didn't want it to. Like, she's just like, yeah, let people draw their own conclusions. What do you think happened with these characters?
And these and stories like this will always, especially if they have a mystery with stuff that's behind it, will always tend to generate discussion, generate talks, and get people more interested. And you'll see this pop up every couple of years. What was it? Hunger Games did it. Lost. Um, Twin Peaks was famous for doing that and
Yeah,
sparking those debates. But this
lots
even
of
goes as far back as Sherlock Holmes. Did he die at the end of that first book? Did he not die at the end of that book?
Well, he didn't die because people were pissed and were like, we need you to write more because there's no way we accept that he's dead. And Arthur Conan Doyle was pissed. But you know what? He continued writing those books chapter by chapter, and he sold them chapter by chapter. So, the incentive was there at
Hmm.
least. But yeah, also, Rob, why was I not invited to that narrative class where you talked about Alan Wake?
Oh, we didn't talk about Alan Wake. We talked about narrative.
Yeah,
Just
but Alan Wake was brought up. Why wasn't I on the phone?
Again, we didn't talk about Alan Wake in class.
You said that you did.
No,
no.
I didn't. I said that we talked about narrative and that you don't want to give away all of your story, which is what
Hmm.
happened in Alan Wake.
I thought you were saying that you discussed it, that you discussed Alan Wake in your class. I was like, that's so niche. I love it. Why wasn't I there?
I 100% believe that my teacher would have loved to discuss Alan Wake. And if you want to pay $3,000 to take the class, come on over and you can talk with her.
Oh, that's some cash I don't have.
But yeah.
I can relate.
So with this though, the Alan Wake, if you're paying attention, we'll see different like writing styles and things pop in there from like Stephen King, various other horror writers. Probably one of my favorite things that I didn't realize it until it was brought up to me is Kurt Vonnegut. Slaughterhouse 5 famously has Kurt Vonnegut as a character in Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse 5. He wrote himself in there. But Slaughterhouse 5 is also a horror book. So
Stephen King also wrote himself into, so he sort of tangent obviously, but years ago Stephen King was hit by a car. Like this is probably like 30 or 40 years ago, I don't know exactly, but long time ago. He was hit by a car, and so in his Gunslinger series, he is in, like, Stephen King is in the book. I think that him and the car that he was hit by are both in the book. So it's not a new thing for writers to write themselves into stories, but Alan definitely was trying to write himself into and out of it, but he understood that you can't just do that. Like, you have to, you have to have some creativity about it, and that was
yes.
where Thomas Zane failed.
Like, kind of on that point, I was a little bit annoyed with Alan Wake being a writer in this story, just because they tell you to write what you know, and a lot of writers take that to mean that my main character should be a writer just like me because all I know is writing. And it's poor writing to do that. And so, like, anytime I see that, I just kind of roll my eyes a little bit. And sometimes I'll continue on with the story because, you know what, maybe it's a good story in spite of this.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense, Alan Wake kind of turned that thinking on its head. Yes, it was a story where they wrote about writing. But the protagonist wasn't better for it.
Yeah, this was not a good time for Alan Wake.
So with that, there's still a couple of
We could
big
have had it all.
could have had it.
Uh,
But yeah, then they came out with American Nightmare, so we'll briefly touch that real.
American Nightmare is super fun. So it's actually so first of all, it plays really well. Like, any control issues that you have with the first game, which I did, like, it's sorry, but like, it was janky to play. I love this game. It was janky. And like, there was one time when you're like running across a really narrow bridge and you have to like make a jump, and Alan would just like jump to the side, and I'm like, yep, that's what I wanted you to do. Very frustrating sometimes, but American Nightmare's gameplay really took to heart all of the downfalls of the Alan Wake control scheme, and really did it way better. So that's my first point, because that was also, it was part of the Quantum Break, or like the preemptive for Quantum Break. So Quantum Break has better controls than Alan Wake does. At least I think so. So it actually is still in the Dark Place. It takes place 3 years after the events of Alan Wake, and it is the Dark Place has basically generated what is essentially an episode of Night Springs, which is the Twilight Zone-esque show that you can find episodes of throughout the game. Also, the Quantum Suicide is, in my opinion, the best episode by far. But it's like, I will talk endlessly about how I feel like the writers at Remedy can do more in 5 minutes than a lot of people can do with an hour. Like, it's phenomenal. But it's like an episode of Night Springs that Alan is now trapped in, and so you have to like try and figure it out. You have to fight enemies. You have to go to an observatory, or I think you end up going to a garage first, and you meet one girl. I don't remember her name. And then you go to an observatory where you meet a scientist, and then you end up going to a drive-in theater where you meet another girl. I think that one's name is Serena. And then when you get to the ending, or what you believe is the ending, it's a time loop, and Alan Groundhog Days it and has to go through that whole thing again. But he remembers everything that he went through the first time, and there's like some vague memories that the girls all have of him as well, and they're just like, have we met before? And so he goes through that. It's a little bit faster the second time, but then he goes through it a third time, and thankfully it's faster that time as well. And by then he knows what to say and how to say it. The girls are like, yep, I remember who you are. Like, kind of like, it's not like, hey, Alan, like, they still are like, I don't know exactly who you are, but I know that we've met before. You find out a little bit about what Alice has been doing. She doesn't remember anything about what happened in Bright Falls. So she just knows that her husband is missing. She misses him a lot. And so she made like a home movie of the two of them, like just memories and like videos and stuff that they had together. And she submitted it to a film festival, I believe. Barry has gone on to become the manager for the Old Gods of Asgard, and he's on a radio. You can listen to a radio. You can listen to several radios, but you can listen to one of these radios, and it's an interview with Barry, and the interviewers try to bring up Alan, and he's like, I don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about the Old Gods of Asgard. And then the girl at the end in the drive-in theater is actually a friend of Alice's. They met sometime after Alan disappeared, and she has been like a huge support for Alice, and is actually the one who convinced Alice to do the little movie about the two of them. But probably one of the most impactful things about American Nightmare, which I do believe is going to come into play in Alan Wake 2, is the villain Mr. Scratch. At the end of Alan Wake, Thomas Zane appears to Alan because Alan's like, I'm gonna stay in the dark place, and everybody, like, Thomas Zane knows it, he knows it, and Thomas is just known as Tom the Diver, and he just shows up in a diving suit. And he has a doppelganger of Alan, and is like, he will take your place when, because you can't be there, but we don't want people to be concerned, so we're gonna like let him be you, basically. And it's not, Alice didn't actually directly see Mr. Scratch, but she did feel like she was being haunted by him. You find this out in Control, actually. But she was actually seeing Mr. Scratch. But Mr. Scratch is a doppelganger that was created based on the world's interpretation of Alan. And Alan was always going to book launch parties. When he was on tour, he would go to parties to mingle with fans, because Barry told him it would be good for his, get close to the fans and, chat with them and stuff. And there was one instance which you actually see the news coverage of in the Bright Falls miniseries, the prequel miniseries to the first game. Alan punched out a reporter because he was just getting in Alan's face with a camera and asking a bunch of questions, and Alan just wasn't in the mood, so he decked the reporter. And so people's perception of Alan was as, kind of like a short-tempered, party guy. And so Mr. Scratch is that, but taken to the extreme. And so he is a short-tempered, absolutely evil, sadistic man who loves to party. And you see him do some murder. You get, because on the top of radios, you also get to watch TVs, and it's just Mr. Scratch taunting Alan with like, look what I'm doing, and I look like you, people think I'm you. And it's him throwing these like crazy parties, and pulling somebody, like he convinced one girl to like go back to the bedroom with him, and like whatever. And and the girl's like, okay, yeah, and then they go back and he murders her. You know, it's a lot of stuff like that. So Mr. Scratch is he's delightfully evil. Like and that's just kind of all there is to him. Like he was created to just be a doppelganger of Alan based on the world's perception of him.
Specifically, the world's negative perception.
Well, I mean, if that's
If that's the
that's how the
perception
world
of him,
perceives you.
that's a perception of him.
Well, I
Um,
think that really plays into a lot of really sort of Alan Wake's original theming. The darkness can't just have any, it just can't have a crappy story going forward. It has to be perceived well. It is shaped by the way people perceive it. It is shaped by the way Alan writes it. And so then this is sort of the counterpart to that. Alan is shaped by the way that people see him, or in this
Mhm.
case, Mr. Scratch is shaped. But it's kind of the same thing, really.
yeah, and it's like, and that is really important to the whole like overarching narrative of Alan Wake. Like it's really driven home by Alan that it can't be easy. It can't be a happy ending. It can't, there's got to be consequences. There's got like if for some, whatever reason he decided instead of taking Alice's place, both of us escape the dark place, there would have to be some sort of repercussions from that. And Alan was definitely thinking on the fly. Like he did not have a lot of time to think it. And so his initial thought was just, I will take my wife's place because I want her to be safe. And like, and so he's like, it does extend to like Mr. Scratch as well. Like it can't just be easy. It can't just be, pretty and tied up in a nice package and whatever. And Mr. Scratch is definitely not a nice package. he is awful, and it's so fun. I love him. I adore him as a villain. Um
And it's kind of reminiscent, from my understanding. Like none of the best horror movie stories that are out there come out as all my problems are solved. One of my favorites, The Thing. Who knows? That thing was a monster at the end, and you don't even know if they did it or it did the job and got rid of him or not. Evil Dead, outside of Ash, that's about it. Who makes it to the end of the story?
yeah, and without stakes, like I'm I'm about to have, it's not an unpopular opinion, but I am about to have some Stephanie Meyer opinions right now. And Stephanie Meyers wrote Twilight. Um so I don't care. I read the first two Twilight books, and whatever, I have opinions, but I don't, that's not the point. But um as proven throughout Twilight, and then I also read her book The Host, which I liked significantly better. But something that Stephanie Meyers does not do is put her heroines in any real significant danger. They will always come out the other side, and it is like it's apparent that that's what's happening. Everything that, like, if you ever watch the movies for Twilight, those put her in more danger than the books ever did. And the movie didn't really do much. And in fact, one of the most like interesting parts was in one of the final movies where there's this big fight against these old vampires and the werewolves and the Cullen family or whatever. And it's like this massive war or this massive battle, and you just see like people getting decapitated and people that you have come to know and love dying, and people are like, holy shit, this is hardcore, only to find out that it's a vision of what could happen if
It's a
these
dream sequence.
it's so Alice can show people visions of the future, but it's so subjective because it's like it's what she perceives the future will be if the things continue down this same path. And so the big vampires leave and nothing happens. And The Host is exactly the same. Like it's a really interesting story and I really enjoyed it. But there were no stakes. There was nothing. I never felt like I needed to worry about the protagonist because she was never in any real danger. And that's like that really like even though I enjoyed like the world and the setting and like the characters and stuff, like I wasn't I didn't feel like on edge or tense about it. I was like, oh, is it actually gonna, nope. Like, is something gonna happen? Nope. So, like, that is, I think a really clever thing on Alan's part, and like obviously in turn Remedy's part. um Sam Lake is one of the writers for the games. And um I think that that's really clever, is there are stakes every step of the way.
Well,
And
and I think that's kind of one of the bigger things about the horror genre as opposed to other genres. I mean, it's really rare for the main character in, say, an adventure novel to die by the end of it.
Yeah.
It's not like it never happens, but it's, for the most part, you kind of know in the back of your head, yeah, the protagonist is going to make it out by the end, he'll win the day, and blah 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 blah. The horror genre, the protagonist is not safe. There are a lot of horror stories where the protagonist dies. And,
mhm.
I don't have like statistics in front of me, but I think it's actually more likely for the protagonist to die than to not.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like at the very least, like at least give them some sort of like, I want to feel like there could be consequences. I'm trying to remember what it was. um Maybe it really was just Final Fantasy 16 or something. I can't quite remember, but there's something where I was like watching it or reading it or playing it or something. God, I don't remember. But I remember being like, "Oh my god, anything could happen." Like, I don't even know that the main character is going to be okay, because like everyone's going. Like, everybody has a chance. The people that you would think would be safe are not safe. And that's like what I want. And like, I'm just gonna say, like, Stephanie Myers is writing these books. Like, when you have vampires, even if hers is like a supernatural romance, there's still a lot of really dangerous situations. And the host is all about basically like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but it's like an
Mhm.
alien species that took over humanity and basically made them peaceful. And they don't want to get caught by these aliens because they basically strip them of their humanity. Like, you're not yourself anymore once the
Mhm.
alien takes over. And there's no stakes. Like, nothing ever happens. And I wanted things to happen. Like, give her, like, their hideout almost got found at one point, and I was like,
Mhm.
they're fine, like nothing's gonna happen. And yeah, like, horror, I think, definitely takes that to, I think it has to take it to another level. Like, you want your reader to be scared, tense. You want them to be like, what is going to happen? I'm really scared that any page could kill the character, or,
Mhm.
you know, like, injure them in some way that would be tragic, or, take their loved ones away from them or something like that.
Yeah, especially with the horror genre, like horror films in specifically, outs how many of them are more famous for the monster or the villain that's in there. Like Halloween has Mike Myers, um, or more importantly, like Jason Voorhees and
Freddy
Freddy
Krueger,
Krueger. They
Ghostface.
or Ghostface. It's
It's the slashers.
it's the slashers, but a lot of them that they are almost the entire cast except for the villain gets remade. Saw does that all the time. The the the
So,
villain
sorry,
stays the same.
I love the Saw movies, but you're wrong. The villain doesn't stay the same.
True, but
Technically, it's whoever's like the title of Jigsaw stays the same,
the
but
title stays the same. But
whoever's in
yeah,
control changes.
The
no, no,
image of the villain
the
remains
image.
the same.
Yeah.
That's more important though. Like
Yeah.
so, who it doesn't matter who's under the mask or who's the monster of that week or who's what it is. Like there's thousands and thousands of stories out there about vampires, but Dracula being the big bad vampire at the end has been the same for what 20, 30, 40 countless different series at
I
that
think
point.
that must be from the 20s, right? Is when
The
like
20s is when they have the 30s is when they have first Dracula film. But Dracula is still the main villain in like Castlevania. Dracula's the main villain
yeah, I'm
in
just saying that it goes back really far. Like,
it goes back far, yeah.
at this point 90 years.
Mhm. But you have these iconic villains. or these iconic monsters, or these things that are out there. And the story is more about how they're reacting, and than how the the heroes and the protagonists can go through it, because the heroes and protagonists might not even make it to the end of the story.
Yeah, I mean the slashers are kind of famous for having the final girl, and so
Exactly.
you kind of anticipate that you would have the villain and quite possibly the final girl, but that's not guaranteed.
You never see these guys come out without loss, without something that's at a risk.
Yeah, and that's what's like really interesting about like Alan Wake, is just that there are so many consequences. Like Rose is a victim,
Mhm.
Nightingale is a victim, Alan and Alice are victims, Barry is a victim, like um all like there's like nobody kind of gets away from that unscathed.
Mhm.
And
Even the old gods of Asgard, even though they didn't have to deal with the darkness that much, are still victims.
yeah, I mean, and everybody in Hartman's clinic is a victim, but like on the like when you think about the main players of the game, Alan's not okay. Like he definitely has like the place. The dark place really messes with him for a good while until he learns how to like navigate that hellscape and how to stay sane and continue on through it, and just like whatever it's going to throw at him, and he's constantly fighting. And so he's not okay. Alice lost her husband and doesn't remember what happened on this, what was supposed to be kind of just like a nice idyllic vacation, where she also tried to convince her husband to see a shrink. Barry lost his childhood best friend. Like Rose has lost herself to now being the Lady of the Light. Nightingale, all sorts of things. But now he's taken over by the dark presence. And so I think that that's really interesting and really important, is that like you get the happiest ending that you could hope for and have it still feel satisfying. Because if it really was just like, and everybody made it out alive, like, okay, like what did we go through all this for? You want to have some sort of consequences.
Mhm.
um but I think that if so Mr. Scratch, he doesn't die at the end. I thought he did. I still feel like he might, but I think he's also in Alan Wake too. They don't call him Mr. Scratch, but there is some doppelganger of Alan in the trailers at least. So we'll see what happens when the game is out. And um I try to binge it if I can get it. I was gonna go into the Control DLC.
Yeah, go into Control real quick.
So that one is actually, it has less to do with Alan. And I really liked this DLC a lot. It was really fun. And it's you kind of without going into the whole with like everything about Control, which I would do. Um Control has, it deals with like liminal spaces and like the realities between reality and things like that, and like in like different dimensions. And there's this one place called the Ocean View Motel, which is it's like a different reality, sort of like a different dimension, where it can just be like, it's just kind of peaceful, and it's very off-putting at first because you're like, oh, this is just a motel playing elevator music, and it's normal in this game that has been so weird up to this point. But this is like a connecting point, and behind each of the hotel room doors can be linked to a different world. So uh in the Alan Wake DLC, Alan actually talks to her in the Ocean View Motel through one of the doors. She can't quite make contact with him, but he's like reaching out and is just trying to reach anybody, and it ends up being Jesse, the main character. And it's like the first external contact he's been able to make, and that's literally because the Ocean View Motel can serve as a connecting point. But so what you find out actually, because again, it's less to do with Alan. He's really just it really is just like an exercise in making contact, I guess. But um Dr. Hartman actually is the big bad in the Alan Wake DLC. So what happened was, because Alan Wake and Control are actually in the same universe. So Dr. Hartman, so after all the events happened, in Bright Falls, the Federal Bureau of Control, which is where Control takes place, agents from there goes to Bright Falls to try and figure out what's going on. And then they found out that Dr. Hartman had been conducting research on these artists, trying to, like use them essentially. And also making it, even if he didn't realize it, it made them susceptible to the dark presence. And so what he did was the FBC, specifically the wiki says, the agents of the FBC, Hartman wanted to partner with them, but the Bureau was like, you're violating paranatural law, which, like, that's not really widely known. Like, how could he have known? But also, like, dude, you knew, like, anyway, Hartman's awful. And the FBC were like, no, and they detained him, and they took all his research about, like, Cauldron Lake and all of these things. And Dr. Hartman jumped into Cauldron Lake, and which resulted in him being taken over by the Taken, and he dies. But because you don't, like, so the FBC came back and got his body, and they took him to the investigations sector in the FBC building. And okay, I'm just gonna read this one right here. Inside the oldest house, which is just another name for the Federal Bureau of Control building, Hartman was kept in the Bright Falls AWE, which is Altered World Events area of the investigation sector. However, when Alice Wake was brought to the oldest house for an interview, Hartman sensed her presence and escaped, forcing the FBC to lock down the entire sector. In 2019, the oldest house was invaded by an extra-dimensional entity known as the Hiss, which is the premise for the whole game, which was of similar nature to the Dark Presence. The Hiss and the Dark Presence met and amplified one another inside of Hartman, stretching him into what's called as the Third Thing, a monstrous form that possessed bizarre powers, but maintained the Taken's weakness to light. And then you eventually kill him. I want to find.
I'm just picturing like a bad date. Here's the darkness meeting the Hiss. Hey, girl, how you doing around here?
So, you like possessing people and furthering your evil schemes? Cool, me too.
Cool. I'm gonna send you guys some pictures of the boss that he turns into, because he's pretty messed up, y'all.
But we can get together. I just have one little piece of baggage, being the darkness. Light might hurt, but I think we'd be cool. You cool, Hiss? Yeah, I'm cool. Yeah,
I'm cool. And so that's kind of the that's where that ends. Is you beat Dr. Hartman, and God, it has been a minute since I have played this DLC.
This dude's just a Dead Space monster.
Yeah, but look at, he's got almost like antlers, but they look kind of like a rib cage also.
Yeah.
Like he is like a twisted form of what, is represented in Bright Falls.
Yeah. Antlers, deer's vest. That's a whole
Ugly
thing.
sweaters.
Ugly sweaters.
Do you not see that in that picture?
Which picture? The first? Second?
First.
On his legs?
No. Do you put sweaters on your legs, Liz?
I don't know. He's got a pattern on his legs. Hang on.
He's got a pattern on his arms, too.
Oh, those are just holes. The holes in his
like
sweater.
A cable knit sweater, though.
It looks like those.
That's his clothes from the game.
It looks like a Christmas sweater to me.
Well, he's always wearing a sweater. Dr. Hartman.
It's literally he wears a cable knit sweater in the game. Here, I'm gonna send you a picture.
Yeah, and I think they're ugly.
Yeah, they are ugly. You're right.
Aha.
I actually own a cable knit sweater, so I guess I can't speak too much. But yeah, he's also got his pants still on.
Man, glad he kept his pants on this one.
But look, his head is backwards. Anyway, that's kind of like what ultimately is the Alan Wake DLC amounts to, is that you get to take care of Hartman, and you know what? Good riddance. That guy sucks. Also, like, okay, it's totally like kind of a side note. Quantum Break is not a part of the Alan Wake and Control extended universe. But at the end of the Alan Wake DLC, they do mention the location, like the city that Quantum Break takes place in. And it's probably just an Easter egg, but I like shit my pants thinking it was going to be something. It was not.
This was not. My pants needs to be cleansed of this.
Yeah, I have to do laundry now. Yeah, so that kind of really fleshes out, or I mean, like, it kind of gives you the nice 9 years of what happened between the beginning of Alan Wake and the Alan Wake DLC in Control. And now Alan Wake 2 is coming out, and I believe takes place in 2023, as games tend to do like this, you know, come out the same year they're released. Resident Evil. And that one is actually following. So this is going to be really interesting. So it follows Alan and a new character named Saga Anderson, which I found out Saga is actually a popular Finnish name. I didn't know that. Which, of note, Anderson is the last name of the brothers in the Old Gods of Asgard, the Tor and Odin Anderson. But she is also accompanied by FBI agent Alex Casey, who is the protagonist of Alan's book series. So we know Alan has been writing in the dark place. He has written Saga into existence, and presumably Alex Casey, who is a very talented detective in the book series. And fun fact, so sorry, I'm full of Remedy fun facts. So Alex Casey, there's 2 manuscript pages in Alan Wake that are told, or that are from the Alex Casey books. The last 2 pages of Alan's book, The Sudden Stop, they were voiced by the guy who voiced Max Payne, who also voices the previous director of the FBC in Control, Zacharias Trench. He does like the live action for him, which there isn't much, but you know, he's there. The original Max Payne used Sam Lake's face because it was a really low budget game, and they were just like using, like, they got the, like, I don't know, like the landlady of the apartment that Sam Lake lived in to do a voice and a face model, and like some of their friends, and I think somebody's mom was a character. You know, it's very low budget, so they were just using whoever they could around. Max Payne's face was actually Sam Lake's face, just on the model. Sam Lake plays Alex Casey in the new in Alan Wake 2. So it's just an interesting, like, Alex Casey was originally voiced by the guy who voiced Max Payne. The guy who's the face of Max Payne plays Alex Casey in the new game. Yeah, I just thought that was really neat. Also, the voice for Alan plays Dr. Casper Darling in Alan Wake, or in Control, but it's such a different role. It's very, very fun.
That's such a 1980s name.
Casper Darling.
Just the last name Darling.
Yeah. Very,
for God's
very
sakes,
Peter Pan.
Far Cry Blood Dragon, you're going after Dr. Darling.
Dr. Darling. I'm going to show you his picture, because this is actually the actor who voices Alan Wake, and I think he's just adorable. And he's so funny and like goofy in Alan Wake, because he's just talking about like these like floppy disks that are that have been possessed by paranatural entities, and so they're haunted now.
So
you mean demons in Shin Megami Tensei?
Yeah. Yes.
No,
Sounds
they're
like
a
a
regular
Stephen King novel.
Huh?
Sounds like a Stephen King novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, 100% feel like everybody should just play Control. It's really fun. Anyway, I have a gazillion facts that I could share, but that definitely covers everything up through the Control DLC and what we know of Alan Wake 2, including that there is a doppelganger of Alan, but whether or not it is Mr. Scratch, we don't know for sure yet. A lot of people think that it is. I kind of just wish that Mr. Scratch would be dead and done with it. But whatever. Like, he really was just in, like, a shadowy figure in The Signal and The Writer, and he was just in American Nightmare, which you can beat in, I mean, I think I beat it in about 3 hours the first time I played it. So anyway, before you guys ever let me ramble about, or before you guys let me ramble more about Alan Wake, I think we should wrap this up. Thank you guys for letting me go on for 2 hours about one of my favorite games of all time.
We might touch into this for other general subjects for different games.
I will bring it up in every episode that I am on, and we all know this about me.
But yeah,
thanks for coming to my Liz talk.
Honestly, I think that there would be, like, let me replay Control. I think there would be some really neat topics to pull from Control as well.
Oh yeah.
Also some time mechanics if we want to go into Quantum Break, which I always do, but not as much as Alan Wake.
We'll get into time travel, that messy thing, into another podcast episode.
Yeah. I'll talk about Quantum Break.
Welcome to Monarch.
I love that game so much. Also, R.I.P. Lance Reddick. He was in Quantum Break. Oh, the dude who played Jack Joyce in Quantum Break, the main character, is playing a character in Alan Wake 2. He is Sarah Breaker, the sheriff, Sarah Breaker. He plays her cousin, Tim Breaker.
Ooh.
I think is it Sean Ashmore?
Sean Ashmore, yeah.
Hey, I got it.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, that was another fun fact. Get me out of here.
All right. Before Liz goes mad with power on this one.
Wait. No, I'm kidding.
Good fake out. All right. Now, that being said, we're going to wrap this up. And if everything goes right, we're going to still be doing a couple of episodes in November, but we might be taking a break in December or January. I haven't decided yet. But we'll be glad to hear back from all of our other stuff that we are working on with Gaming Theater. That being said, this is Gaming Theater Podcast logging out. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you.
Oh, there was actually one more thing. Gaming Theater Podcast is hosted, created, produced, and edited by Leo Garcia, the Geek Scorpio. Our music is A Drinking Game. Stock media provided by Stormwave Audio /Pond5. If you want to send us some financial support to help with producing things for Gaming Theater, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingtheaterpresents. It helps us out. Want to send support that doesn't hit your wallet? Please leave a review with wherever you hear your podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. It really helps out. Thank you for listening.